Oh my God, the volume's
Yeah, I
high.
can hear
Hi.
you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming in great.
I'm I'm using AirPods. I don't have a fancy microphone yet. So
It's totally okay. I can hear you really well. Am I coming in clear to you?
yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, hello from Alberta. This
Yeah,
is
nice
great.
to actually see you.
Yeah, we were actually supposed to meet, and I'm sad that we didn't, but that's the way life goes sometimes.
Well, next trip out, or maybe we'll be out east sometime.
I hope so. If you ever come out to Ontario, you're always welcome here. I've got a boat. I would gladly take you fishing.
Oh, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you have the lakes like we do around there, but we do, and they're pretty fantastic.
No, we don't have too many lakes, but we have some land along the Bow River. So I don't know if you fly
Oh,
fish. I don't fly fish. I just cast,
no,
but
no,
it's pretty
straight out of the
legendary
boat.
for that.
Yeah, oops, sorry. I've always wanted to try fly fishing. It's just never a thing that I've been able to do. There isn't a whole lot of options around here. You try to fly fish where we are and everything gets caught up in the trees because there's no wide open space, right? It's all open water or your little
Right.
rivers are, yeah, captured by the trees. We're recording, by the way. So,
Okay.
welcome to Talking to Horses, the podcast. I have with me Tanya Clemens, and you are a generational farmer. And as your bio says, your family farm started in 1909.
Yeah,
Is
that is
that's
correct. Yeah,
yeah.
my
So,
great grandfather.
oh wow. So it all the same land, or have you guys expanded?
Oh, definitely have expanded. It started off with just like a small 50-acre parcel, I think, actually, when they first homesteaded in 1909.
Yeah.
And it was actually a little plot of land that had been ceded to potatoes by the farm they had come across. So they
Yeah.
ended up being able to buy that and some neighboring land. And my dad really did a lot of the expansion throughout his lifetime. So, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty amazing because I am sitting right now in an area where it's generational farming all around me. And one of the funny and coincidental things is the farm that my wife and I bought 5 years ago used to be in my family. And I had no idea because I come from a line of farmers as well. And so a long, long time ago, this farm was owned by the Miller family, which was not my direct family, but blood related, like, you know, like a couple of people removed. And so when we bought my farm, my cousin owns a farm a couple kilometers down the road, and he said, "Oh, you bought the old family farm back," which was really kind of neat because I had no idea. So it must be
Oh,
pretty
that
amazing
is
for you.
weird. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
weird how that works out.
strange coincidence. We had no idea. We had no idea the connection or the link because, excuse me, my great grandfather, sorry, he passed away after World War II. And with him, the history of everything of our family kind of went because my granddad was too young to know his father at the time. So, pardon me. Let's get back to you, though. It was just a kind of a funny coincidence. So, your family has been on the land for almost 120 years, which is really incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And my dad still has like tons of memories. He's grown up there. He lives in the house that he was actually born in. That house
Oh,
was
neat.
built in 1917 and they've renovated and updated as they've gone through life. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of history right there. And he'll walk me out like into the pasture and show me like where the old artesian well was, where they originally got water when they homesteaded there. And yeah, just really neat things. There's a lot of history there, a lot of connection to that land.
Yeah, no kidding. And now, when you say artesian well, are you talking like a hand pump type of system, like where it didn't have an electrical pump down there? You were bringing the water up yourself?
Yeah, it started off actually just as like a natural flowing spring. So they were fortunate to have that. And then they put in like the hand pump. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. You don't hear
Hmm.
about that very often, or people that would still have the memory of being able to do that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Now, from your farming experience, you created Farm Geek, and that's kind of how I met you originally. Was our
that's true.
Instagram algorithm kind of came together, and we had a conversation. I think I don't remember how it was, but we ended up talking about farming a long, like years ago. Probably I'm talking 3 years ago, 4 years ago now.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
ever since, we've been able to just, lightly communicate back and forth. And like I said at the beginning, I was supposed to come and visit you last winter when I was in the Alberta area. I bought a pickup truck, and my plan was to visit a series of people. And then there was a massive snowstorm coming, and I had to try and get home. And was that, I think, or was it when I had visited Seb? I don't remember which one it was.
I think it was a snowstorm time, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I ended up getting trapped in Regina for 2 days. So, like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. That was
truly,
definitely the same
truly,
time
yeah,
then.
that
Yeah.
was okay. So that was the one. Now, I want you to talk to me about your Farm Geek platform, because what you say on there and what you provide to the public is it's quite awe-inspiring. And so if you could just give me a rundown of what it means to you, because clearly you have this incredible passion for Alberta's farmland and your own obvious hands in the dirt experience from the time you were born to now and into the future. So what is Farm Geek to you?
Oh, well, thank you. I think it kind of stems originally from conversations with maybe friends in the city and such that, traditionally we used to always have, a grandparent or an aunt and uncle that still had the farm, and people were only one generation removed from having access to a farm, and they'd
Mhm.
spend their summers out at their grandparents' farm or things like that. And now, as generations have gone on, there's more generations in between that connection with the farm. And I think there's a huge disconnect between, lots of the city life and lots of the farming life and where our food comes from and how the processes are now. So while I was sitting in the combine at harvest time, which is hands down my favorite time of the year, I have a
Yeah.
little bit of time sometimes, or in the evenings after I'd, filmed a bunch of the sky or the combines rolling through the fields and things, as just started putting them to music or putting them to videos and talking about farming, and kind of just had Farm Geek come from that. And it's not some huge platform or anything. It's just my own kind of entertainment. And I love the connection that it's brought with farmers from across around the world. If I post something about like a grain elevator, there'll be people from all across the US sending me their pictures of their grain elevators and the grain elevators in their family. And I just get grain elevator envy from all of them. But things like that. So there's this huge connection between people that we maybe didn't even have the opportunity to have before, anyways, amongst the farm lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And it's funny that you talk about people having and reminiscing about being on granddad's farm or going to visit grandma on the farm and staying with her. Um, we have people that board horses on our small farm. And I'm now hearing the stories from the generation that's older than me about how they used to visit their grandparents' farm. And so you're so correct in that a lot of generational farming is being lost to industrial farming, right? Where the farm is no longer being passed down to the children. The children are either have gone away to university and started their own career and they're not interested in the farming. And I could say, honestly, for some specific reasons, farming's not easy. It's
Mhm.
very undetermined. You don't know if you're gonna win or bust, right? Um, but in a way, it's kind of sad that what we see now is I don't hear young kids talking about I going to granddad's farm. I hear people that are much older than me reminiscing about going to the parents or the grandparents' farm.
Yeah, so we're getting a little bit more far removed even from it now. And it's difficult to keep it going when people move off of the farm or find different career paths, because to just start up farming independently on your own is almost impossible. There's like the few people that manage to make it happen, but it's just so expensive to buy the land or rent the land, to get the equipment or to lease the equipment, to pay for all of your inputs to put that crop in the ground. It's too much for the average person to be able to do. So to be in the farming world, you almost have to be in a farming family and have access to it that way. And it's sad that
Yeah,
sometimes, people don't choose to continue that on for lots of reasons.
yeah,
But
yeah. I, I, I question why, and obviously it's very complex, right, Tanya? And you know because you see the
yeah,
bills and you sign the checks, and you're the one out there tilling the ground, and you're the one out there doing the harvest. So you have a deep understanding for this. My wife and I are like technically we are first generation farmers. Not that we have a big
very
operation, right?
cool.
Yeah, it's very small, but what you just said is the allure of farming also comes with a massive price tag. And so we bought our farm. We had to take out a mortgage for that. Then we had to take out a loan for the farm equipment. And then every time we go to the feed store, it's like you just see the dollar bills rolling. And so I hate saying it that this way, but people are trying to live. And we're living in a time right now where it's insanely expensive. And this is going to kind of transition to the next part of your life here in a little while. But
Yeah.
um, people are seeing that it's almost not economically feasible to start up farming. and to be like a pure farmer where it is your income, right? Like you burn the boat and you're on your island of farmland, and that is what is going to sustain you for life. That's pure farming in my mind. I have a hobby farm. My wife and I both work and we have careers, and then we farm behind the scenes, right? Whereas you, for example, you're a farmer purely. Like, this is your life, this is your lifestyle, this is your career path. It's what puts food on the table.
Yeah, but there is lots of farmers that have off-farm jobs too to help cover that, or the wife works off the farm, or there's some combination of both because, yeah, some years, like, the profit margins just are so slim or they're in the negative, so to balance that out, lots of people do have off-farm jobs as well. That's
Yeah,
pretty
I
normal.
was talking to a cattle farmer down the road, and it was last year. He said last year was the first time in over 30 years where he was selling his beef for more than he sold it 30 years ago. It
Oh,
was
wow,
incredible.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, and I'm not sure if you're into beef farming. I think you're mostly cash crop.
Yeah, we used to be into beef, but probably got out of those 12 or 15 years ago now. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is too bad, kinda miss them, but it was a lot of work too, so
Yeah,
applaud people who do that.
it's the only animal we don't have on our farm is cows.
Oh,
We have all
really?
the Yeah, we've got everything
Yeah.
else but. Yeah. So, tell me what has changed? What is it about the culture, or what is it about Canadian society that has changed where I'm not saying farming isn't respected anymore, but where it isn't a sought after opportunity?
I think it's just that disconnect, like we kind of talked about before, that people aren't familiar with it and they don't realize that now that a generation has gone by without being out on the farm and seeing it, they don't realize how much it has progressed in that generation, that timeline as well. That, still thinking maybe back that when they would see pictures from their grandparents of using horses and stuff to farm with, or the really old equipment with open cab combines and tractors and such, that that's not actually what most of farming looks like now, that we have advanced so far in technology and the way that we're able to, like, respect the land and take minimal out of it and put maximal back into it, and all of that technology has just grown so much, and I think people have not seen that because they've got the disconnect and haven't the family members associated with the farm anymore.
Yeah, and one of the things that you speak of sometimes is that people don't realize where their food comes from.
Yeah,
It's
that's very
almost,
true.
yeah, we all take for granted that we just go to the supermarket and food magically appears, but behind every bite of food is a farmer who grew it.
Yeah, and it's
And
very easy to be quick to judge farming practices, or, to be very organic minded, or, certain mindsets, but not fully understanding that lots of the crop production in Canada is to feed a global population, not just our own population. But there is a lot of countries across the world that are depending on the food that we grow here to supply them. And we only have a finite amount of arable land to grow those crops on. So our technology has increased a bunch. We're constantly trying to get more from the land, but putting in just the amount that we need to succeed, and just trying to keep a little bit of profit if you can.
yeah, it's an interesting thing. People don't recognize this. You're right. One of the things that's interesting is that a vast majority of the acreage used to grow crop is actually not to feed people, but it's to feed the animals that we eat.
Yeah, to feed the
And
animals that feed the people.
yeah, and so it's so diverse and complex. And I think Farm Geek, even though you say it's not a big platform, it doesn't matter. You got to remember, and we've spoken about this, everybody does. You only have to you only have to shift the perspective of a few people, right, to be kind of winning the game. You don't have to be Joe Rogan. You don't have to be a great big star with millions and millions of viewers. You put out a great message out there, and it affects few people's hearts. And then that sort of grows. We all become a Venn diagram where our circles connect. And if you start something like this, it helps people that you don't even understand or recognize. So Farm
Well,
Geek
thank
is
you.
really cool. For those that are listening, go check Tanya's Instagram page out. It's at Farm Geek, I believe. It's just FARMGEEK. I don't know if there's a space or anything in between there.
There's a farm underscore geek. on Instagram.
Farm underscore geek. Yeah.
Mhm.
The content is lovely. It almost brings a tear in my eye because you put so much heart into it. So way to go. Don't worry that you're not Joe Rogan.
Oh, that's okay, and I like that, it actually creates a space for other farmers too, and part of that and I think this is part of our connection, like you and I together too, is, the mental health space that it creates for it,
Mm.
and by having this Farm Geek page, like, as small as it is or whatever it is, it's brought, um, rural mental health organizations kind of into my circle, and then I can do collaborations and help share their messaging and also talk to other farmers about the struggles that they're experiencing and just creating a space that this is a home that farmers understand and farmers feel accepted and you can find mental health resources that actually understand what you're going through too.
Yeah. So
So that's been pretty cool.
that's a really good point, Tanya. I'd like you to speak a little bit more on that because this is a funny thing. We all focus on all of the intense careers out there. I say that in quotes, air quotes, because I was a policeman. So, the law enforcement guys and gals and the people that are in the military and the men and women that are paramedics, they often get the spotlight when it comes to mental wellness and mental health stuff because it's out there in your face. But one of the more important things that we don't know, and that is statistically driven, is that farmers are some of the most mentally unwell people and that they struggle the most. And you brought this up, farming and mental wellness in farming. Give us a little bit more detail about that. And if you have any of your own personal experience, I would love for you to share it because it's not easy to be a farmer.
Well, I think that most farmers probably know a friend or family member that has succumbed to suicide from the pressures of farming or pressures in their life or have addiction problems, different things that they've had to do or chose to do to get through some of the pressures of it. But I guess that the positive part of all of that is that there's quite a few rural mental health societies now and organizations out there that provide that help that actually understand because it is different. If you had a first line military, first responders, that's a different it's a whole different world that needs like a different mindset and understanding of the traumas and the things that those people have experienced and same for farming it's just a different lifestyle so to have people that you can phone up and be able to talk to and listen to that actually understand where you're coming from as a person is hugely beneficial so there's been I like porch light society is a big one in our area that we I work with and just try to help support ag no is another one I've worked with mentel in the past um, yeah, there's quite a few out there. Do more
Yeah,
ag is another one.
do more egg. I'm just writing them out so I can put them into the show notes. It's
Thanks.
the truth is I didn't even ever think about it until I actually saw a podcast that Zach put out on his Canadian podcast. And he was speaking to a woman who was an advocate for farming mental wellness. And I honestly, like, I was taken aback by it. It didn't really register until I listened to the details and thought, okay, well, that makes sense because, life as a farmer is hit or miss. You have a couple of bad crop seasons or there's an economic downturn, and then you're wondering where the money's going to come from, right? Because you've got everything tied up in investments and seed and fertilizer, and it could obviously be a massive stressor. Does your
Yeah, it
farm
does. Sorry, go ahead.
does do you feel that pressure?
Well, I would think a lot of farmers definitely feel that pressure. I do too. Like it's a huge investment to put your crop in, and you're at the mercy of so many things beyond your control. Like Mother Nature, you pray that she will be kind
Mhm.
to you, that there will be timely rains, that they won't rain at the wrong time when you're actually trying to harvest the crop that
Right.
you've spent all year taking care of. Then there's the global markets. There's your own government sometimes actively working against you, tariffs, all different kinds of things come into play. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of stresses that everyone faces, plus like the interpersonal dynamics and just trying to like carry on a legacy and do good at your job because it's been something that's been in your family for generations. There's a lot of pressure that way too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great segue into um, it's another part of your life that you're also deeply involved in with, which is like the Alberta government and Alberta policies around farming, and especially as it pertains to federal legislation. And now there's new information, well, not new information. Now what we are seeing as Canadians is a premier, a very standout and powerful premier in Danielle Smith, who has sort of taken Alberta's reins and pulled Alberta back and said, this is not what Albertans want. And you have gotten yourself involved in that. And I'm keenly interested because I'm completely outside of that, right? I live in Northern Ontario. I live in a very small rural area that is in the middle of nowhere. We get 4 hours to the nearest city. I'm disconnected from a lot of the big city politics or even provincial politics for that matter. But you've gotten yourself involved. I've seen you hobnobbing with some pretty big names. You've had an opportunity to speak with and interact with a lot of great people. I've seen I think I've seen you with pictures with Danielle Smith. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if every opportunity I have to meet her and chat with her, and then I get a picture. She kind of knows that's that's what's going to be coming down the pipe if she runs into me. But yeah, I'm very proud of her leadership. It was quite like a, I don't know, her story is very interesting, and she is a very well respected, powerful leader. But there was a time when she was not either, and she was, she made missteps and was very humbled when she crossed the floor and basically handed over our province to an NDP socialist government. That was a tough one. And I know a lot of Albertans turned their backs on her or were very
Mhm.
angry and upset. And I was very upset at the time too, but I found that I kept listening to her. She had a talk radio show, and I kept listening to her, and she created this platform there where she would invite people of all different opinions and give them the space to actually talk and discuss. And it's so unlike any other talk show host that I have listened to. She wouldn't talk over them. She'd offer her perspective and she'd hear them out. So I think that that process actually gained her a lot of respect. And then watching her come back into politics um, during COVID, there was obviously terrible things happening across the country. But in Alberta, we had a premier that had said one thing, that this definitely would not be happening. There would not be lockdowns and mandates, and then do a complete 180. And it took a big grassroots effort to remove that man from his role, to find a new leader that could be respected and lead Alberta towards something that was actually more free and more prosperous. And the people chose Danielle Smith, and we got her into the leadership and got her elected as the premier of Alberta under the UCP banner. And she's done a pretty fantastic job. I think there's people that are a little bit polarized on her, but for the most part, she's very well respected, very adored. And I would also add that she's the premier of a province within Confederation. So her mandate and what she acts on is to try to create as sovereign of Alberta as she can within Confederation. Like, her Sovereignty Act wasn't just called the Sovereignty Act, it's called the Sovereignty Act within a united Canada. And until Albertans speak out in enough numbers or vote in a referendum to deliver her a mandate of independence and sovereignty without Canada, this is the way that she's leading the province right now.
Interesting. So, um,
Mm,
obviously, that act speaks to empowering Alberta outside of federal legislation.
right. Because to change federal legislation, specifically the Constitution, we've just found that it's actually impossible for Alberta to do. The system is designed not for Alberta; it's designed for Ontario and Quebec. We have four insurmountable hurdles if we wanted to open the Constitution, like, say, to address equalization. We had a referendum in 2021 on equalization, and Albertans voted 62% in favor of ending equalization. But to
Mhm.
do that, because it's in the Constitution, we'd have to open the Constitution. And the first step is to have 7 out of 10 provinces in agreement, representing at least 50% of the population. That's pretty hard for us to get opened. The second
Yeah.
is a majority vote in the House of Commons, then a majority vote in the Senate. And then basically, if you got through all of those, by some miracle, Quebec has a de facto veto vote. So to open the Constitution and seek the change that we want is not possible through these means. But luckily, there is the Clarity Act and a legal pathway for a province to leave Canada. or at least to vote to leave Canada and then bring all of the people to the negotiation tables.
Gotcha. And just to clarify for people, this equalization thing happens to be um, and I'm not clear on it perfectly myself, but equalization payments are given to each province from the profits that Alberta makes on its economy. Is that correct?
Well, it's tax revenue that's collected all across Canada, but because Alberta has a typically younger working population, more revenues are collected from Alberta. They go into the general tax coffers of the federal government, and then they are doled back out. So we pay to the federal government, and then they give us back a little bit in services, but we never get back the full amount that we've paid in. And $14 billion of what we overpay every year goes directly to Quebec. And the problem is that the equalization formula is outdated and a little bit unfair because Quebec has
Mm,
this big hydroelectric industry that doesn't make it onto the balance sheet for the equalization formula, which would be equivalent to Alberta saying, oh, we just won't put our oil and gas industry on
right,
the balance sheet. Then all of a sudden
right.
there'd be money coming to us. So,
Gotcha. So indirectly, it has to do. I see. I always assumed that it had everything to do with the oil industry. I didn't realize that it was a different capture altogether.
yeah, and then, well, the oil industry is another factor of pushing for independence because there's so many policies with our federal government that are punitive to Alberta's oil and gas industry,
Yeah.
specifically our provinces.
And and is there a why? Is
Is
that
there a
like is
why?
yeah? Why is there these punitive repercussions for Alberta and the oil industry in Alberta? That why would the federal government have these, or do you have an answer for?
Well, I have answers that I think that they have. I don't know. They don't give
Well,
us a
that's
real
good enough. We're
answer on
just
that. Like,
yeah, we're having
yeah.
a conversation. It's all good.
Well, I think that there is like there's they've succumbed to the kind of like the woke green agenda that we have to do things a certain way and at all costs. And you're not allowed to ask questions about if there's possibly a better way of doing that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a concerted effort globally or I don't even know to speculate on why they're doing it. To
Okay.
me, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
I'll break the conspiracy theory ice then. How's that? Um,
Okay.
I, I see what you're trying to say without trying to say it. And it's that the green agenda, the CO2 carbon emission, the net zero agenda that we have been, that's been jammed down our throats here in Canada, um, quite frankly, is a joke. Now, I'm not claiming that there is not a problem with um, the earth being polluted. I'm not saying yes or no one way or the other. What I'm saying is Canada's economy is the one that's struggling, and no other country really is adhering to this except for a few other ones like France and England. And the
Right.
countries, and the countries that are going for this net zero propaganda, if you will, are the ones that are suffering the most. And no other country is adhering to it. So it's like as the saying goes, we've got roughly 200 countries in the world and all are contributing in some way to this greenhouse gas problem or the CO2 emission, this carbon capture issue. Well, what's Canada going to do? Like if we are like considered 1% of the global carbon emissions every year, what is net zero going to do to the whole globe uh, if we reduce our carbon emissions and at the same time completely tank our economy? So when you have an idea that you're saying, it might be, I think quite honestly, it's a globalist agenda. I'm just going to say it out loud. And unfortunately, I think the federal government in our, 11 years of, I don't even like they say liberal. I don't know what that means anymore. Uh, the federal liberal government has bought into this idea that we need to have this net zero economic structure, and it's completely destroying us. We all know that from one end of the country to the other. We all know it is, even if we won't admit it. And obviously, with Alberta being the mecca of crude oil and LPG and LNG, of course you guys are the target, right? Because if in order to show that we are effectively becoming this net zero country, we have to go after the place where the the evil gas comes from. Like
Yeah, and
I
it
don't
is
know how else to
absolutely
say it, right?
propaganda because
Yeah,
recently we just had that big shipment of LNG come all the way from Australia to the East Coast when we could have had Alberta LNG. And it is possible to pipe it to the east. I've listened to Marty up north speak about it many times. So there is one case of propaganda, or the big European LNG contract that was proposed to Trudeau, $750 billion contract, like $750 billion. I can't even
yeah,
fathom what that number means. And Trudeau said, that's not in our business plan. So he passed it up and the US snatched it up. But the funny thing is that now we sell our LNG for like $4 a unit to them so that they can sell it for $14 a unit to fulfill that contract. Like this,
yeah.
none of this makes any sense.
Yeah. And so as an Albertan, I can recognize and appreciate that many of you, especially people on the conservative side, the people that have a more rooted history in Alberta, would definitely see this as a problem. And so there you can appreciate I'm concerned as a non-Albertan that if we split up the Confederation of Canada, that Canada as a whole will be harmed by this. And I don't know if that's the right or the wrong thing to say because I don't live in Alberta. I live in a small community, Ontario. And what happens in Ontario affects me, right? And there's no way Ontario is ever going to be the one that goes sovereign. I mean, we've got Canada's capital and we've got Parliament Hill here, and we're the hub of the nation. Whatever that means now, I don't even know because Ontario is almost beyond recognition as far as what Canada used to be, as far as what our heritage used to be, right?
What I see now is that we grew up with this idea and this very patriotic heart that we loved our country and that flag means something. Like I have it tattooed like on my shoulder, which is like
Yeah.
really strange at this part of my life actually, but we grew up with this really idealistic view of what Canada was. And we talk about our military and the sacrifices that were made for the true north, strong and free. But as we've continued to grow and realize our government is not acting in that way, and we're going so far down a path that I don't know if we can reverse course. And I don't see a path for being able to save all of Canada. But I know that with the Clarity Act and the legal pathway that the Supreme Court developed, there is a pathway for us to save Alberta. And if Alberta can depart from Canada and become an independent nation, it will quickly be one of the strongest, the freest, the most prosperous nations on the entire planet. Like the resource wealth we have here, the grit of the humans that work here, the entrepreneurial spirit and the business owners. We have such a huge future that we can just almost grasp. We just need this independence referendum. And if we can do that, and on a global stage, so the world is watching to see can Alberta be this beacon of light and freedom, then maybe other provinces and other countries will see that it can be done too. And you can get out from underneath this woke, orchestrated green agenda that is crushing mankind right now. And I don't know, maybe Ontario will have that choice sometime soon after that if Alberta is not the economic driving engine of this country any longer. Ontario has great resources and great wealth too. And it might just take that little bit of prodding that maybe you should look at something a little bit differently. Maybe there is better for Ontarians too. Saskatchewan, I believe, will probably be very closely behind us. They have a
Hmm.
fairly big independence movement beginning now. And again, they're in a very similar position to Alberta with a lot of resource wealth, which makes it a lot easier too. Quebec has told us, like almost kind of laughing, like, imagine if you guys actually separate before we do. How ironic.
Yeah, because they've been
Alberta's,
trying for what, 50 years?
yeah, and it's looking very likely that they will elect their separatist party in their next provincial election. And right there,
Yeah.
that's their mandate.
I think they just elected a new premier. Just as of they elected a woman, and I don't remember her name, but I think it was just a couple days ago.
Oh my goodness. Yep.
That there's a new premier of Quebec. Yeah, I don't remember her name, but I do believe she's got some pretty strong opinions about Quebec and their affiliation and connection to Canada. So
Yeah.
it's
Sometimes I just live in
scary.
my little wormhole of Alberta politics.
Yeah, that's okay. That's where you are, and that's what affects you, and that's what affects the meals on your plate, and how much fuel and how much diesel you can afford, and what cost of fertilizer is, and everything, right? And um, when you talk about Canadian pride or this, I don't know what it is. This I grew up. I was born in 1980, so I think you and I are close in age.
Yeah, 1 year
Um,
apart.
yeah. Okay. So you're 81, right?
Oh, I'm older than you.
I tried to give you one.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, you could have lied and said, yeah. When I think about Canada, the first thing that comes to me is like a swelling of the heart, kind of like you said. You couldn't have been more proud to be a Canadian for so long. Like on the world
Exactly.
stage, we were always powerful and strong and kind to a fault. And yet, when the world needed us, we sent our soldiers and we did an awesome job defending others. And we always were able to give to other nations. And our economy was never massive because we don't have a huge population. But it was always relatively stable within a few percent of our national debt versus our GDP. We never had like some egregious runaway debt like you see in the United States or other nations like Greece or
Right.
France and places that are completely, economically bombed now. And until recently, like in the last decade, sadly, we came out of Stephen Harper's conservative government and um, things have gone downhill since then. And not only have they gone downhill economically, Tanya, but uh, spiritually and socially and culturally, it's not recognizable as Canada anymore. And
And
so,
that's a large part of the independence movement too. There's the economic factor, which affects every household, and people obviously want more prosperity and to be able to afford to pay their bills and run their businesses. But there's that freedom aspect too. And we grew up believing that we were strong and free, and we've continually seen those freedoms chipped away until we don't actually recognize this Canada anymore. And it's just really sad. And I don't wish poorly for Canada. I still love this country, but I do want freedom for my kids and for future Albertans and the next generations of people.
yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I When I say I love Canada, it's like I love Canada minus what is going on that's against the will of the people. Because you'd have to you if you sat down every single Canadian and you asked them about Canada and what they wanted as a Canadian citizen, doesn't matter. Like you'd have to like strip away their political affiliation because that always muddies the water. That's one of the saddest parts of politics is that the political party always is the thing that muddies the water of what people truly want. We all kind of, as Canadians, want the same thing. There's
Right.
nuance about whether it's more money in education or more money in health or whatever, like because we run sort of a split capitalist socialist paradigm within Canada where we have a massive amount of social programs, but we also have free capitalism, like free enterprise capitalism in Canada as well. So we're like a blended democracy type of like a blended liberal democracy, if you will. I think every voting Canadian wants the same thing, but we're being duped by the government, by media, by social media bots, by a whole host of very complex things that are kind of pushing us against each other and making us think that each have the wrong agenda.
That's
And
true.
clearly Alberta
Sorry.
and your premier clearly sees that.
Yeah, and I think that's very true within the Alberta independence movement. And I've spoke to that quite often, especially with people that are in opposition to it, that our fundamental values are pretty much exactly the same. Like we value our right to pursue work, to provide for our families, to build better communities, to strengthen our communities, the freedom to travel, to move around. All those fundamental things are what we value as Albertans. The difference is in the path that we believe we can achieve that. And when people are opposed to Alberta independence and the path that I'm choosing to promote and educate on the merits of, I usually ask them, well, what is it that Canada is doing so well for you right now that compels you to not even look at the merits of a sovereign Alberta? And usually that's where the conversation ends. I have yet to have someone answer that with a strong argument for me. What is it that Canada is doing so well for us? Because I see a government that has complete disrespect for our taxpayer dollars, that is a self feeding, hungry monster. I think 44% of our funding in Canada goes to fund the government. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, I think
There's so much waste and bloat.
it's the first time in history over the last, well, in Canada's history, this last decade is the first time ever that we've had that kind of runaway government spending ever.
Right.
And
And
it's
if we're going
and
to go
it's
into, sorry,
no, no,
there's a
carry
little
on. If you're
lag, so
gonna
I don't mean to cut you off.
yeah, no, if you're gonna go into carry on.
And if we're going to go into an independent nation and forming something new, we should not be taking the things that we find detrimental in the system that we have in place right now with us. Like, why make the same bad choices in a new nation? So there's definitely talks of forming a whole new system government, something not a complete direct democracy, more of a republic, but where the power is actually brought back into the people's hands. Right now in Alberta, we're trying to have this citizens initiated petition to force a referendum on independence in Alberta, and the courts are trying to shut us down. I'm like, having a petition to your elected representatives is one of the oldest forms of democracy, and you're telling us that we can't do that now? Like,
Mhm.
that has to change.
Yeah, you're right. And so it's very complex. And I have some questions about this. Like when
Mhm.
Alberta is talking about independence, is the scaffolding in place? Like what I mean by that is like the economic scaffolding in place that this could happen, and what would happen with currency? There's a lot of really important things. Do you have stakeholders available? Do you have trading partners globally available? Are all of these things already in the process so that, it's like you can flip the switch if there was a positive referendum tomorrow, if you voted all in favor, say aye, and everybody raised their hands and said aye, is the structure in place for Alberta to become independent? Or is this going to take, is this a generation? Does it take a generation to do this?
If the federal government has their way, they will try to make it take many generations, but that is not in the interest of Albertans at all and not part of the plan. And probably the best resource to go to for information on that is actually one of the constitutional lawyers in our province, Keith Wilson. He puts out amazing information answering all those questions, and he's obviously very very intelligent, very articulate, and very calm. So he's very well spoken on those things. Also, there's the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is an educational society that I've worked with for a number of years now, and through a combination of a bunch of people, they've put out a fully costed fiscal document for sovereign Alberta called The Value of Freedom. And that's available at albertaprosperity.com. It's been public for about a year, and they've invited, there's actually a link on there that you can click on if you have any like questions or clarifications on any of the numbers that they've used. So they've invited public feedback, scrutiny by economists, all sorts of things. And that shows all the costs for forming a new Alberta, where that money would come from. Right now, Alberta overpays Ottawa to the tune of 40 to $70 billion a year. Since 1961, we've overpaid $800 billion more into Confederation than we've received back in services. So if we were just able to keep our money, because I think people kind of forget that the government is actually funding us back services with money that they first collected in taxes from us. So if
Mhm.
we just kept those taxes, all of those things that the federal government currently funds, well, we have the funding for that. We do fund that anyways. So the transition and the way that Keith Wilson speaks about it too is that it's actually not quite as complicated as some people would make it out to be. All the structure, infrastructure, and everything is here already. It's more just a turnover of who is in charge of it. So anything that's
Mm.
federally regulated now becomes provincially regulated. When we have that initial referendum, which is looking like it's going to be October 19th, 2026 of this year, we have a referendum day already for different questions. We're just waiting to have our question put on that for independence. Um, After that, it forces a constitutional conference, negotiation with the government where everyone's brought to the table. And what they're proposing is that we actually have something in place with our negotiations and a timeline, a limit on it of what our demands are, what our numbers are. The government can come back with their rebuttal and we agree on it. And within a few months that we're done. So that in
Mhm.
2027, we're an independent nation. So I don't know if
Oh,
that
wow.
answered like all of your questions, but
Well,
those
yeah.
resources will answer some of them, or if there's more specific ones, let me know here.
Well, I'll be sure to add them to the show notes for anybody who ends up listening because it's important, and uh, uh, all of Canada's watching you guys and
I
gals.
think a lot of the world is, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's scary.
It's
They're
it's
watching
similar
like
to
some of the
what's
bigger players, not me necessarily.
well, it's similar to what's going on in Ireland. Have you seen any of that information?
I
It's
have
pretty
the
it's pretty
farmers
serious.
and truckers are shutting down the whole country right now, and
It is
I know
completely
there's
shut down. Yeah.
it goes makes me feel very reminiscent to our trucker convoy here, and you might have thoughts on that too. Being from Ontario, might have a different perspective on it, but in my perspective, it was a time when we weren't allowed to ask questions during COVID. There was no questioning what was happening. You were ridiculed and persecuted if you questioned things. That's what it felt like. And
Yeah.
then we had the trucker convoy wanting to go and to be heard, and if Trudeau had just come out and met with some of the leaders of the convoy at that time, or anyone from the convoy, and talked to them so that they felt heard, it probably would have diluted everything and made everything a lot easier. But we couldn't even be heard. So I've learned from the liberal style government that we have in place now that you can't question and they won't listen to you. And I think that's where Ireland is at right now, except that I've seen some videos that they were actually going to go into the legislature and had meetings set up with their government leaders. It's like, oh, that's
Yeah.
good. Maybe they will listen to you. At least they're meeting with you.
Yeah. I've heard rumblings that there's something planned for Canada. I don't want to spoil it. I don't know much information, but I've seen little bits and pieces of it here and there, and I can only hope. Now, trucker convoy. I was not in disagreement with it in any way. Um, we're supposed to have the right to do that. We're supposed to have the right to speak out against the government and have our voice heard. And what we saw with the government, which in the Supreme Court was just obviously, it was just stated that it was unconstitutional and that the Emergencies Act was what did they say? A gross abuse of federal power.
And nothing happens
And
from that though.
well, no, nothing will happen because
Yeah.
now we've got this now we've got an unelected majority government in Canada. And that's a whole new ball of wax. I'm sure Alberta's just loving to see that. Where we've had people that were essentially offered, and I'm only going on what I've read. I don't know this firsthand knowledge. So this is just me speaking on what I've seen in the news and what I've heard on through social media. Because when I say the news, I get my news not from the legacy media. I don't watch CBC
Yeah, I hope
anymore because
not.
there's no trust in it. So I get my news sources from podcasting and from what I get through social media and then I have to formulate what I think is true. And I'm sure it's the same with you, Tanya, when you look at Canada as a whole. We don't even know what's going on because you can't find any truth in the people that should be representing us, the journalists and the people that are offering us the news, including newspapers. I feel like they're all bought and paid for. And in fact, the liberal government appears to have been bought and paid for by Davos. This World Economic Forum, the globalist elite idea that we're going to be one nation and that Canada is just going to offer its resources ad nauseum to all of the very wealthy, and we're just going to continue being even worse slaves to some form of thing that we didn't vote for is kind of
Right.
frightening. And Ireland sees that, and so they've stood their ground. And the Irish people, thankfully, are very powerful, very angry, but prideful people, and they're using that power to say to the government, no, we won't stand for this. And so I wasn't a policeman by the time all of this happened and the trucker convoy was going on, and they were sending troops and sending law enforcement down to Ottawa, and I saw the videos and how awful it was, and I just morally it was corrupt on every level, and I was really saddened by what I saw police officers mandated to do and ordered to do in the interest of what they called justice, which was unjust in every way possible.
Yeah, that's true. I try to focus on the good parts of that convoy, and usually like when I do think about it, it's like makes me almost like tear up with pride and just love for humanity that came along at a time when people were feeling so absolutely isolated and alone
Mhm.
and like no one understood what we were thinking, and then all of a sudden everyone started grouping together and realizing, holy, there is a lot of people that are having the same questions and the same desire to be heard, and just wanting a better resolution to this. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I don't believe that the world should be open to everybody. It's just the way I am. Um, there are certain parts of the globe where peoples and their culture and their history and their religious ideology are something that I'm not interested in, keenly not interested in. I recognize that Canada has a colonial past, but so does the whole world.
Right.
And there's no ethnic group that is immune to the dark side of humanity. But Canada, since we became a country, has done its best to serve as best we can the people of Canada. We are an immigration style country where many people come here for the right reasons, and many people have come here for the right reasons, and I adore them all. If you are a Canadian with a Canadian passport and you love Canada and you love Canada's culture and you ingrain yourself into it, uh, it's awesome. I think it's great,
Hmm.
because that pride comes. You get that piece of pride when you become a Canadian citizen and you come here, and you get to enjoy what historically was one of the most free places in the world, one of the cleanest. We have, I think, we have the best natural resources in all of the world as far as what Canada has to offer. You go from one coast to the other, and you can go from winter to summer in any month of
Yes.
the year, right? And you can see everything from desert to mountains to crystal clear water to ocean to tundra. I could go on, and that is the thing. That's what Canada means to so many people, and it's the erosion of that that is very scary.
And so sad. How have we let a government erode that so far and get to this point where we're feeling like we're past the point of no return? That's
Mm.
just shame on them for doing that. And I don't
Yeah,
know, like you spoke to immigration, we did have a really good immigration policy, and I think people were happy with it. Like it was not easy to get to Canada. You
yeah,
had to have like a certain number of attributes and be like willing to contribute to our economy and to be part of Canada. And then the Trudeau government changed that and brought in so many people without even having the infrastructure to properly take care of them, let alone are already Canadians. I don't understand their reasoning behind it. I don't think it was positive reasoning behind it. But now we're in a
yeah,
situation where we can't keep up with the number of people that we have. And then
yeah,
the tax draw for some of the things that I see that they're doing for paying for newly landed people that don't have jobs and haven't contributed to the economy yet, but they're accessing all of our services that are paid for with tax dollars by Canadians who have been here working. It's just a shame that, again, our tax dollars are treated with such disrespect.
yeah. All of the financial incentives there are for people to come to Canada and then do nothing. And then they fall into a system that never gets to them because the system is so inundated with people and so overrun that they're backlogged by a dozen years. And so you're always catching up from year one down to year 12. And then at year one, then year two starts the immigration and the asylum seekers and the refugee seekers. Then they push that 10, 12 year thing down another year and another year. And so everybody at the top that finally gets pushed through and is no longer an asylum seeker and no longer a refugee and maybe shouldn't be here. Then you deal with year two. And then so what you have is this compounding problem in Canada where we don't have the housing anymore. There's no houses left. It drives the cost of living through the roof. It drives the price of property and houses through the roof. And
Or the burden on the education system. I just
yeah,
heard a statistic that in Alberta, there's 180 languages in our education system. Like that's how many languages are spoken. Teachers
yeah,
can't possibly deal with that in some classroom settings? It's a lot.
Yep.
And then there's
And
different behaviors and cultural issues. And yeah, there's a lot of areas that have not been able to keep up with the massive influx of people.
right. And there's going to be people out there that are haters that say this is racist. The conversation that we're having is racist because it's not inclusive. Well, find another place in the world where you can go and act the way that some people that come to Canada act, right? What's going to happen to you? You know, and so what you said earlier was Canada used to have this great immigration policy, and everybody always called us a melting pot. And that was another endearing quality of Canada. It really was. It
Yeah.
was an endearing quality, but we were a bilingual country that had two national languages, and that's it. And we were a secular nation, which meant if you wanted to practice your religion, you practiced it at church and behind closed doors, and that was it. Cut and
Yeah.
dry, right? There didn't need to
And it
have
seemed
any
like
other
everyone
rules.
was pretty honored and respected that way.
Yeah, I didn't even know what people's religion were. If they were practicing any religion, I didn't care. You know, we all
Hmm.
cared about, are you, are you working? Are you participating in Canada's economy? Are you a criminal or not? Um, are you going to, go play soccer with your kids? Am I going to see you at the Christmas concert and say hi to you? And we'll see you at the restaurant here and there. And then we'll watch you at the hockey game in the arena. And then we'll high five at work. And that was the only thing that mattered. And then the culture shifted. And it, there most likely is a global agenda that is pushing this nonsense into places like Canada that are free because we are the stronghold. We're one of the few. I mean, it might be that democracy is almost over in Canada now, but there is a list of places, and it's actually the globe, and it shows all the countries and how democratic they are. And as of maybe it was like 5 or 8 years ago, Canada was one of four nations that was still considered truly democratic, where we got a score that colored our country as one of the few democracies left in the world. And even
Right.
now, that seems to be eroding. So what we're getting at is this is obviously what's driving Alberta's sovereignty. A lot of these issues are driving Alberta's sovereignty, if I'm correct.
Yeah, a lot of them are. I think it all comes down to taking away our ability for self determination. Decisions are constantly being made for us by people thousands of kilometers away that don't understand our way of life here, our culture, our priorities, our values. And it should be a unifying thing to seek self determination, to seek freedom, to seek prosperity. But our own federal government is working very hard to drive wedges within society to make sure that people don't seek those things.
Yeah. When we did our Christmas visit, we drove from Ontario to Alberta, and then we stayed with Alex and Seb on their little ranch
Yeah,
in Cardston.
so beautiful there.
Oh my gosh. You know what was the most beautiful part? Was the people.
That's so
It
true. When we said that
it
when we were
felt
there as well.
it felt like stepping back into the 80s and 90s. It reminded me, even the town and the way it looked, other than vehicles are new, the facade appeared old. And I got to learn about how they're still teaching school in these small communities and that there are bragging boards where kids get to actually show off that they won something instead of everybody getting participation medals. And there was this real sense of what Canada still was, pockets of it all over Alberta. And then we traveled up into Lethbridge and we felt the same thing there. People, in Ontario where I live, even in my little town, and I know almost everybody here, I've been here my whole entire life. I still get people, I'll hold a door for somebody and they don't even say thank you anymore.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, it's sad. Ontario is, you wouldn't recognize my small town as a small in the middle of nowhere town. The face of my town is completely changed. Within 5 to 8 years, it went from in the middle of nowhere Canada to it looks like a suburb of Toronto. And
Wow.
it's strange, but I can't see how all of the people that have immigrated here from other places in the world, I can't see how they've all got jobs and how they're all able to live like we all used to live because our town has nowhere to go. All the houses are bought up. We don't even have housing projects going up. So I don't know how it's happening and how we're able to sustain it. It's so strange to see something happen in the blink of an eye. And then you go to a place like Alberta, and that was one of the things. People were holding doors and having courtesy and saying please and thank you, and having conversations with us where you talk to people. It's not even supposed to be a novel idea, to have a conversation. They're strangers, but you have a conversation with them. And now everybody's just in Ontario. It's just the blinders on, like you're a freaking draft horse pulling something, and you can't look anywhere else because you'll lose your focus. And you don't see that. Like, you see, there is this essence of Canada left in Alberta.
I feel that, but I guess I feel like I usually have blinders on myself to the rest of the world a little bit, 'cause just being out on the farm and in the country, you are so removed from cities and a lot of society. Social media makes it a little bit different now too, but
Yeah.
most of the people out here have a very similar mentality, and I would say we're very libertarian by nature. We just kind of want to be left to our own devices. Let us run our farms, do our work, take care of our families, build up our communities, and then government just leave us alone. I don't know, we haven't
Yeah.
seen as huge a change in society and the way is run out here, other than farms have gotten bigger and there's less farmers and the community's kind of gotten smaller in numbers. But otherwise, I think we are a little bit sheltered out here.
Yeah. It definitely feels that way. Like, it was really a step back in time. It was like a time capsule. And I thought it was beautiful. And truly, until we had some tragedies here at home, my wife and I, we were coming home to sell. I wasn't joking about that when I talked to you about that a
Yeah.
while ago. Like, so we lost our house and then we lost our barn, which took our entire farm operation. But after we saw Southern Alberta, that we thought, this is it. We hit that highway outside of Calgary to head south towards Lethbridge and then down towards Karsten. And my wife and I just said, this is where we want to be. It just felt, that area of the western part of Canada felt like something different. And we still do. Like, we still talk about it right now. Once we can rebuild and stuff, I think we're moving west. Hopefully, Alberta will allow immigration. Like, I don't know how that's going to look as an independent
Well, you
nation. I
you
don't know
got
how.
the gritty nature. I'm sure you'd be welcomed here.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I wonder how that would look. Has that even been a discussion? Have you heard anything about that? Like, how would Alberta allow people to move?
Well, I think initially they'd have to do like a actual immigration freeze just until we got our house in order and to give us some time to catch up to the lack of infrastructure we have for the population we currently are serving. But yeah,
Yeah,
they've talked about that. It's in the value of freedom document. Some of this That's just a proposal, because
yeah,
ultimately what happens is Albertans get to ratify a new constitution, and everything that happens in a new Alberta, that will be an Albertan vote. So that
yeah,
constitutional conference that happens after the independence vote will be huge because we'll be deciding a new nation and what that looks like. So the immigration will be part of that as well. But they do have a proposed immigration plan that was very similar to what Canada used to have, like a points based system, a merit based system that, if you
yeah.
come being able to speak one of the languages, or in Alberta, it would probably just be English, I'm assuming. If you can speak the language, if you have an employable skill, things like that, then you would get a point system and be accepted in based on that.
Yeah. It's interesting that that becomes such a hot topic, and I've always wondered about that in Canada. Why would any Canadian disagree that should be part of what a person needs to have when they come to this country? You want to immigrate to a country. There's nothing wrong with that. Come from anywhere, but have some skills,
Yeah,
offer yourself to the locally, to the national economy, and be able to speak. You have to integrate yourself because everywhere else you go in the world, they will not accommodate you. And Canada has always been known as an accommodating country, but there's got to be a line in the sand, right? And if you don't draw a line in the sand, then eventually the people that used to be the minority become a majority, and then they draw the line in the sand. And it's not going to be where you want it.
that's very true. And just immigration is in direct conflict with what many people say they love about Canada, right? They're very prideful of Canada. They have a lot of values there that they respect, but why then would you promote an immigration system that waters that down and takes away so many of those things that are part of your ideals.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there definitely has to be a balance.
like I touched on before, Canada has almost always been a secular nation. And that's not to say that we don't allow religion. It's the freedom of and the freedom to be religious. It works both ways, right? Canada has never used religion in its politics. You know, in the United States, for example, you have to decry your faith in Jesus Christ and and a Christian belief in God. You'll never be president. It's just the way. I mean, it's the way it is now. It never used to be. The founding fathers attempted to make it a secular nation, but over time, Christians got their way and it became a Christian nation. Canada, thankfully, was a secular nation. It was always founded on take your beliefs, take them home, and bring them to church, and then live. And I
Right.
don't, what's so wrong with that? This doesn't have to touch on skin color or your ethnicity or anything. All it is there is a culture in Canada. There is a way that we do society. It is completely free. It's very low in crime. It's very high in opportunity. It's clean. It's beautiful. It's affordable. Come here, bring your skills, bring your kids, and integrate. I mean, that's like a 7-point bulletin that could be on every port of entry, and that could be the title. Those are the things you got to hit. Everything
Yeah.
else, I don't care. Come here and praise Allah, but you don't get to enact Sharia law,
Right.
right? If you have specific what like clothing that you wear because of your religious affiliation, fine, fine, but you still have to be a Canadian. Plain and simple. You still get to keep your personal things. Just keep them personal. You know what my wife and I do in our farm and on our house? That's our personal stuff. You go out in public and you put on your little public hat and you become a Canadian and you do Canadian things, right?
And you wear
And
your
so
plaid.
yeah, this is new. This plaid thing is new, and I do it because my wife thinks it looks good. That's the only reason. I was
Oh,
never
I like
honestly a
plaid. I'm
plaid.
a farmer.
Yeah, there you go. I've got all kinds of dirty old plaid farm jackets, but this plaid shirt thing, that's a new thing my wife did for me. That's a side tangent. Is When I first heard about Alberta talking about sovereignty, my first thought was that this was an attempt to put pressure on the Canadian government to change. But this isn't. This is like a real life, like we're doing it. We're going to flip the switch and Alberta's borders are going to be closed and that we're going to be a nation.
Yeah, like the goal is to seek independence and become a new nation, but the pathway, and I did used to speak to this some when people were kind of deciding, do we want to go like full independence or not? But the pathway gives us the opportunity for both. Like the only way to be able to negotiate with the federal government from a position of strength for the first time in Alberta's history is to have a successful yes vote on an independence referendum, because that brings them to the table. That gives them the threat of, we are leaving. And,
Yeah,
Canada may come to the table and they may come with a really great offer. And Albertans may say, you know what, this is perfect. They've checked off all the boxes of all the things we want to stay in this country. So we'll stay. And this is our agreement. We amend the constitution and everything's good. I think people are realists, though, too, that Canada is never going to come to the table with that offer.
yeah,
And there's still so much to correct in Canada and so much corruption and the government structure and all those things that we're this close to becoming an independent nation where we could make all the wrongs that we have in place right now right and build something new and prosperous and free. And I think once people vote yes in that independence referendum, why would we say no to standing on our own 2 feet and being that beacon of light and freedom for the rest of the world? Like, how could we say no to that?
yeah. Especially given the current situation in our Canadian politics, which is I don't even. There's not even a word for it. It's well, I guess the one word is terrifying. You know,
Yeah,
when you see how
disheartening.
recently, yeah, when recently what we've gotten is an unofficial majority government. That's never happened in Canadian history, and it's not what the people voted for, and so that's very
Right.
alarming, right? Yeah, and then also on the global scale, you see how our federal government has aligned itself over the last many years with certain entities that I completely and explicitly disagree with. I don't want us affiliated with or the WHO having authority over our sovereignty.
Right.
I don't want our members of parliament and our prime minister um, buddying up to the World Economic Forum. I'm disinterested in, and many Canadians are, they're disinterested in these globalist policies. We're the second largest place in the world. Like, we've got it all. All we need to do is have our economy steered in the right direction by taking away bureaucracy, removing a whole bunch of the nonsensical parts of the federal government, because the spending is, like you said, 40% of what is it, our national GDP, or is it,
I think it's the GDP.
yeah, that's
Or
insane.
yeah.
That's insane to believe that we spend so much money there.
Man, we have so much of our government that was proven to be like infiltrated by the Chinese Communist Party. But yet, if we talk about trade with the US, there's this derangement syndrome that overtakes people, and we're ridiculed for pursuing that. That is our biggest trading partner to the south and the most like minded out of probably all of our trading partners. And I know in Alberta, like 88% of our trade is with the US. So when we're
Mm,
pursuing talks of an independent Alberta, it would be foolish to not be talking to the US because going into a new nation, they are very likely to be and continue to be our strongest trading partner.
yeah,
I have more in common with their values than the Chinese Communist Party.
totally agree. What is it looking like as far as the statistics go for what the referendum vote is going to look like? Is there a pretty strong favorite that it's going to be
I
um,
don't actually know.
for?
There's been polling done. I know that's like our premier has done polling within their conservative governments, and I think the number was upwards of 40% for one poll, and then other polls show lower. And I don't know. As the polling I always find hilarious too, because they'll poll like 434 people or they'll poll 1,000 people. I'm like, is that actually good science? I feel like that's not a big enough number to actually conduct a poll. But from the sentiments that I'm feeling, I still feel very confident that we're actually going to win this independence referendum. We're in the petition phase still that's trying to
Right.
push to get the referendum put forward. So people have to sign in wet ink. Their ID has to be shown to the canvasser who's credentialed. Lots of times, rural Albertans will need a second piece of ID because it has to have like your legal land description or your municipal address on that. And rurally, we don't often have that. It's usually like a rural route or a PO box or something. So
Right.
it's made it harder to collect signatures and stuff. And lots of people don't want to have their name on a list. You know, people just like their privacy and revere that. So I think that the petition phase isn't showing how many people are actually promoting and seeking independence. And there's a lot of, cancel culture in the world too. So if you're seen or photographed signing that canvasser sheet or talking to one of the canvassers, there's people that have lost their jobs over things like that.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I was going
people
to
are
say
fearful.
if you've got a sort of a pro-left or a liberal agenda type of employer, then of course you would risk your employment status if they find out, right? It's just the way that the world is now. That's one of the other complexities of today's day and age, is that social media has made this cancel culture, ever present. It's in everybody's face. You say something and bam, all of a sudden you're no longer part of society, like
You're
you,
you're a racist, misogynist Nazi
yeah,
automatically. It's like, am I misogynist? I didn't realize that. Am I racist and
yeah,
Nazi? I
yeah.
cool. I didn't never been
How does
called
a
that
woman become a
before.
misogynist?
Yeah. But when you're
Oh
at
man.
the independence referendum and you're in that ballot box by yourself holding that piece of paper, I hope that people actually stop and think for a moment. And people that are in favor of independence, I hope that they just like pause and take in what a significant point in history that little piece of paper is and marking that X, what that signifies. And
Yeah.
to those who are still undecided when they go in there, I hope they just like they think about the opportunity that that little X on a paper could present to you and how far we can go with prosperity and freedom. And you won't be
Well, that's
scared of checking a box there because no one's watching that.
yeah, that's a great message, Tanya. It's sometimes it's awkward to ask a guest, any last thoughts, but just cap this off for me, because we started off with 1909 and your great grandfather starting a 50-acre potato farm and then building it to the present time 120 years later where Alberta is threatening to separate from Canada. And I mean, I can't change the fact that that bothers me because I think of Canada
I
as
get that.
from coast to coast. And I would hate to lose the beauty and the wonder and the mountains in Alberta just take my breath away. I've been there a bunch of times. We did my wife and I did our honeymoon there, and it would really make me sad. But at the same time, I see the message and I think that it's like a loud and clear ideal that all Canadians need to do, which is look in their heart and see, is this what is this the Canada that you want?
And Alberta's not actually leaving, like we are still right here. And you'll
Yeah, I
still
guess
be
you
able
don't pick it
to
up and go
visit
put it
and
in the
travel
Pacific Ocean.
across, right? Like it's
Yeah,
still accessible and that beauty's still there and the people are still there. It's just going to change more the dynamic economically for Canada. But I guess like from Alberta's point of view that since we joined Confederation, which we didn't even get to negotiate our way into Confederation like the other provinces did, Alberta and Saskatchewan were just absorbed into Confederation. We've been asking for more sovereignty and fighting for more sovereignty. There's been, Meech Lake and Charlottetown Accords. We've had premiers that have stood up against like the national energy program that was placed on us, firewall letters. We had to follow the Canadian Wheat Board. We've had so many things that we've been trying to just carve out a little bit more sovereignty for Alberta. And every time, Ottawa's answer has been no. So now we're to a point where there's actually a legal pathway that we can follow. The Supreme Court paved that for us. We can do this legally. We've never had to fight for our freedom before in Canada. And we're so fortunate that we can take this fight to pen and paper and it doesn't have to become a bloody battle. There's actually a path that we can take that avoids all of that. And I don't think it's wrong for Albertans to seek that self-determination and the sovereignty and prosperity and better for their communities and their families. And if Canada can't open up the doors and open up the Constitution to negotiate that with us, then this is a path that we have to take.
that was beautifully put. And I say, go Alberta and go Ireland. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, that was great, Tanya. Thank you very much for joining me. This is, for those that are listening, this is really a good way to listen to a grassroots farmer whose DNA is literally planted in the ground in Alberta, who has a deep passion, because you certainly do. I see it on your social media posts, and I urge everybody to go follow farm_geek, farm geek, and Tanya Clemens. You've got 2 pages. You're on TikTok and Instagram that I know of. Your message is clear. I think it's something that all Canadians feel in their heart, though I think many Canadians would wish for Alberta to remain Canada if Canada could change in a positive way and in the way that you guys have a message for the world, which is leave my Canada alone. And so I thank you so much for your information, Tanya.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show. I guess just like the very last final little thought is that, we might even differ, you and I, on the path for Alberta a little bit. And you're sad to see Alberta possibly be leaving. And I hope that when people are in opposition of thoughts, that they revert to civil discourse and just realize that being able to discuss and openly talk about this without animosity and hatred and using vile words is a path forward. It is the path forward that we need. We need to be able to talk and make sure that we're finding some common ground and making the best choices. And that happens through civil discourse.
Isn't that the truth? Thank you.
Mm.
I really appreciate you jumping on the show with me.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice seeing you.
Yeah, good to see you, Tanya.